Hello, Graeme. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Hello.
Yes, please. I'm your moderator and I haven't received your bio information. Can you send me a very quick one? Very short,
I did. I've
brief one.
sent it already.
The information about you so I can introduce yourself. I can introduce you to the audience.
I sent it. Did you email me this morning? No.
Actually, I am the backup version. I'm sorry because the moderator was um there's some problems. She couldn't
Sorry,
come.
what's your
So
name?
my name is Nhật, NHAT.
NHAT. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Please just send me a very short.
How can I send
You
you
can
my?
send me to the messages.
In where? I've never used this platform before. Here. No. Yes. Okay. Found it. Just give me a second. Have you got it?
Thank you so much. I got it.
Should I share my screen?
Can we start now?
Yep.
Bây giờ chị nói à? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, our presenters and participants, and I think good morning to you, Brian. Yes. Okay.
That's right.
Welcome to Virtual
Thank you.
International Convention 2022. And on behalf of the organizing committees, we would like to say thank you so much for your presence today. And your contribution means a lot to us. So I am Nhật, and I'm your moderator. And I'm delighted to see all of you here today. And we will hope that by the end of the presentation, we will have some, message or knowledge to take away. So before the presentations, there are few consideration I would like to address with you. So in case if you have any questions, please leave your questions after the presentations. We will have 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. And we gladly to welcome Mr. Graeme Harrison in this session, which is who he will present about very interesting topics entitled "Evaluating the Impact of the Flipped Classroom Approach: Lessons Learned from ELT Practice." So Mr. Graham has worked for many years in teaching, assessments, and education reform in a variety of contexts, including the South Africa, Europe, and Asia. And at Cambridge, English, he has been involved in, among other things, exam productions for tests such as IELTS and B2 first, implementing national English exams in Colombia and Chile, and teachers' education and curriculum development reform in Malaysia. So his current roles as a principal impact managers involve leading on impact training and development and carrying out impact research on Cambridge products and services. So we are very happy to be here to listen to his presentations and welcome Mr. Graeme Harrison.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Now,
Yeah. Please raise your hands if you can hear me all right.
yeah, we can hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. So yes, as you said, my name's Graeme Harrison, and I am the head of impact operations now, actually. So when that biography was written, I was a principal impact manager, but I do more or less the same job. I work for Cambridge English. And today I'd like to talk to you about a research project that we did to evaluate the impact of the flipped classroom approach. And that's going to be the main part of my my talk. But first of all, I'd like to just explain generally what we do in the impact team, because we have an impact team in Cambridge, and why it's important for us at Cambridge English, and why I think it's probably important for a lot of English language teaching, assessment, and learning materials providers. So, first of all, I'd just like to kind of give you some context. So Cambridge University Press and Assessment are a part of the University of Cambridge. And as such, we share the same mission, which is on the screen there. So it is to contribute to society through the pursuit of education, learning, and research at the highest international levels of excellence. So we know quite an important mission statement, that, and perhaps not always easy to achieve. But from the perspective of Cambridge University Press and Assessment, we need to think about a few questions to answer. So first of all, are our teaching and learning materials, are our exams, are they contributing to society at the highest levels of excellence? And if so, how are they contributing? So we need to find out this kind of information. And we do this by evaluating our outcomes or our impact of what we do, of our products, so our textbooks, our online learning materials, our exams, our exam preparation material, all of these things. So that is what the impact team do. They do this evaluation. And, oh, sorry, skipped a slide. There we are. So just to give you a definition of what I mean by impact, because it's a word that I've already used quite a few times, and I'll continue to use it throughout the presentation. So the definition that we use here at Cambridge English is the outcomes our English language products and services deliver for learners and the wider society. So one of the key points there is that we're not just focusing on the learners, but we are also thinking about the wider society. So we have a wide range of stakeholders, of people who are interested in our learning products, in our exams. So these, of course, are students or learners, but also the parents of those at school age in particular, teachers, like most of you will be, I'm sure, schools and people who work in the school system. For bigger projects, for example, education reform projects at a national level, ministers of education. We also think about, of course, universities, because many universities accept our exams and use our learning materials. And companies, businesses as well, also use our exams as a measure of English level for when they're recruiting people for jobs. And they also use our materials and their exams for internal professional development in English as well. So we're thinking about the outcomes, the impact of our products, and we're thinking about them across a wide range of different stakeholders, different users of them. And at Cambridge University Press and Assessment, we have a philosophy and a practice of something that we describe as impact by design. And you can see this as a kind of cycle of continuous improvement. So we begin, when we design a learning product or we design an exam, we think about what the impact is going to be for the users, and we try to make that impact as positive as possible. But of course, there's an element of guessing. We don't know exactly what the impact is going to be. So we produce the product, we design it with impact in mind, and then we put it out into the market and people use it. And after a while, we start to monitor and evaluate. So we look for evidence, we collect data about the impact of our product in the market, and we analyze that data and we feed it back into product improvement or product redesign. So you can see it goes right the way around in the circle. We keep on doing this in, as I say, a cycle of continuous improvement, and the idea is that we can provide the best products possible for our users using this approach. So you can see that the impact measurement there, which is kind of in the bottom part, the third part of the circle, is the part that the impact team are particularly involved in. And we have recently developed, excuse me, an impact framework. So the impact framework is used to make our impact data collection more consistent, to make sure we're collecting data in the right places, and to make sure we're doing it, as I say, systematically. So at certain times and across the same things, you know, every time we collect at the same areas. So you can see on the screen there, we have some impact domains at the top of the framework. So learning, teaching and assessment, and these will depend on the products that we're impact evaluating. And in each of those domains, we have some impact areas, and I've put a few there in each of them to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So in learning, for example, our learning products, a textbook, for example, we would want to find out the impact in language proficiency. So is it helping our students to improve their language skills? Life competencies, something quite new that we've begun incorporating in learning materials, you know, variously called the 4 C's or 21st century skills, things like creativity, communication, critical thinking. So we're interested in evaluating these as well, and also the engagement and motivation of our learning material. So all of these, this framework underpins, kind of supports our impact evaluation work. And when we get the results of that, it gives us a kind of clearer path for product improvement. We know the areas that we're doing well in, and we know the areas we're doing not so well in, and so that we can improve our products. Okay, so that's a general overview of the impact team, what we do. So basically we collect data and we analyze data on the impact or the outcomes, the benefits that our products have for their users. And as I mentioned, that can be a wide range of people depending on the product. So what I would like to talk to you about in more detail then is an impact research study that we did in Mexico at the Universidad del Valle de Mexico, or UVM for short, because it's quite a long title. So I'll be referring to them as UVM. And this is a study that we carried out over the last year, and we're just finishing it now, actually. So just let me pause to have a drink. So to give you a little bit of background about UVM. So UVM is part of the Laureate group of universities, which you may know of. So they are a group of private universities, and now they're focused on the Americas. They used to be much more international, but because of various, I think, issues with not least the COVID-19 pandemic, the company has become much smaller, and it's focused on Mexico and Peru primarily. And they have a mission to provide high quality, accessible higher education. UVM has 32 campuses across Mexico. So it's a big organization. It's quite a prestigious higher education institution in Mexico. And it has degrees in a number of different subjects, including medicine, law, engineering, business. Last year they were engaging around 25,000 students in learning English. So a big higher education provider with over 100,000 students, I think, and big provider of English language classes as well. So in 2020, UVM implemented a change to their English language teaching. They began to implement the flipped classroom approach. So just to explain for those of you who may not know, so in this approach, students do self-study lessons online in which they learn language content, for example, grammar and vocabulary. And then during the teacher-led classes, they're much more focused on communication skills, so particularly speaking and listening. And there's also, with the flipped classroom, an important element of independent learning. So the students have to go to the online platform, they have to do the study themselves. So the kind of things that teachers in the past would have taught in the classroom, for example, the grammar, they will learn that on their own. They will have to question it. If they don't understand it, they'll have to come into the classroom and ask the teacher specific questions. So really the students really have to take responsibility, or much more responsibility, for their learning. And the classrooms themselves, when the teachers are teaching, the idea is that they're very student-centered. So the teacher is more of a facilitator. They don't stand at the front and give grammar explanations. They facilitate communicative activities for the students, and they can answer questions and give feedback to students as well. And the online study, so that the time that the students spend outside the classroom learning English, is through one of the, so we were involved as Cambridge English, they were using our platform, Touchstone, which is now being retired, and they'll be moving to Evolve Digital in the future. So that's a bit of an overview of UVM, what they were doing with the flipped classroom. So turning now to the actual research. So as a client and you know, a partner as well of UVM, we were very interested to see how effective the new approach to teaching and learning was. So we worked together to implement an impact research project. And the purpose of this research project were to gather data from students, from teachers and from course coordinators on a range of different areas. And so we were mainly interested in how the flipped classroom approach had affected student engagement. So how interested were students, how much they enjoyed their learning, how motivated they were to learn. Teacher engagement as well was very important for us because, of course, I'm sure, as you know, without an engaged teacher, it's very difficult to have a productive classroom. So teacher engagement, how much they believed in the new method, the new approach, how much they enjoyed teaching in that way, how motivated they were, etc. And we were also interested, of course, in language proficiency. So were students learning successfully with the flipped classroom approach? And in particular, as UVM were very interested in improving speaking skills, what was the effect of the flipped classroom approach on oral communication in English? So those were the four key areas that we looked at. And in order to answer these questions or to study these areas, we collected quite a lot of data. We collected quantitative data. So we had questionnaires with all of the three main stakeholder groups, so the teachers, the students, and the course coordinators. And we also gathered qualitative data, the how or the why of the flipped classroom approach. How were things working? Why were they working like this? So we asked open questions in the questionnaire where people could write their opinions and their feelings about different areas. We also had smaller focus group interviews, so groups between 3 and 6 people. We sat down with teachers, and we sat down with course coordinators to find out what they thought. And we also did some classroom observations as well to see what the teaching practice was like with the flipped classroom approach. And in total, we had quite a large number of participants, so almost 4,000 students responded to our questionnaires. We had over 200 teachers and 27 coordinators. All of these for the questionnaires, smaller numbers for the focus groups. I think we did 3 focus groups with around 6 people in each for the teachers and for the coordinators. And we did around 6 classroom observations as well, just to get a feel for what was going on in the classrooms. And what did we find? Well, we found quite a mixed picture. Some negatives for students. So first of all, student engagement, we did find some negatives. So around 36% of the students were spending less than the recommended 2 hours on online self-study. So that obviously has implications. If they weren't studying enough on the platform, they probably weren't preparing for the teacher-led lessons, which means they weren't taking advantage and being able to participate as much in the communication activities. So that was an important finding. We found that a lot of the students are young. They're coming straight from school, and they find it difficult to transition to change this new approach, where they have to be much more independent learners. And we found that students would become, because they didn't really know what they were doing with the new approach, they would fall behind in the first few weeks, and they would become demotivated. So there was a problem here with demotivation and students falling behind. And in some cases, students were perhaps not so well supported by the teaching. So the teachers felt they had to put a lot into the class, a lot of activities, and the pace was very fast, and students sometimes couldn't complete the activities, and I think they felt a bit frustrated by it. So, you know, some issues there for the classroom teaching as well as the online platform. But we did find some positive things as well. So we got positive feedback on the topics, which is very important for us as producers of learning material. We want our topics to be engaging. And I think, generally speaking, students and teachers thought they were. And teachers were beginning to notice after a length of time some improvements in learner independence. So they were engaging more with the platform, and they were understanding what they had to do, and they were learning study skills, which is a great thing because, you know, research has found that learner independence correlates quite strongly with learner achievement. So more independent learners learn better and learn to a higher level. So, you know, that's a positive finding. In terms of teacher engagement, as I said, another important area to look at. We found that most teachers were positive about the new approach. They were embracing student-centered learning, student-centered teaching, so moving away from them as the person who stands at the front of the class and gives a lot of information to becoming facilitators, so setting up and monitoring and giving feedback in the classroom. They were really positive about promoting learner independence. They could see what a good thing it was, and they understood that more independent students would learn better. So they were really positive about promoting that in their lessons. And they enjoyed the focus on communication as well. They saw that as a really key area for students to be learning, particularly speaking. However, this was not all of the teachers, as we found out. So in the focus group, some of the teachers mentioned that their colleagues perhaps weren't really so sure of what they were doing, didn't really let go of the class, so they didn't become facilitators so easily. They were more standing at the front and giving information to the students, which is not really what's required in the flipped classroom approach. And we saw evidence of this in the classroom observations. So some teachers didn't really use small group work. So they had 25 students in a big group, and they would just talk at them, ask a few questions. And there weren't many opportunities for the students to engage in conversation with each other, for example. So areas for improvement there, definitely. In terms of English language learning, data from both the surveys and the focus groups suggested that the flipped classroom approach was supporting student learning well. The online self-study lessons in general were preparing students well for the classroom lessons. So the idea is the online learning introduces topics and vocabulary that teachers can then exploit in the classroom, and that seemed to be working well. So they were learning well online and then coming and using that what they'd learned, that language in the classroom. The focus on communication seemed to be having a positive impact on levels of speaking. So teachers reported that they felt that the speaking levels of students had improved since the implementation of the new approach. And not specifically language learning, but a bit of a kind of an added bonus really was what we talked about before, improvements in study skills. They were learning how to study English better, and thus improving their language because they were becoming more independent learners. But we also found a few things that could be improved as well. So teachers commented that they had less classroom teaching time. So the program, the flipped classroom program, had reduced the contact hours with teachers. So this meant that they could give less feedback to the students, and feedback, as we know, I think, is a very important way of promoting learning. So they weren't so happy that the class time had been reduced, understandably. But we found when we observed the classrooms that some of the teachers were doing very well, but some of them had issues about giving feedback. They missed opportunities, so they didn't do this small group work. They didn't monitor. They didn't give feedback when there were opportunities. So there's what you might call a teacher skill gap. So teachers really didn't have the pedagogical teaching skills to know when to monitor and give feedback. So that's something, again, that needs to be thought about and improved. And turning now to oral communication. So, as I've mentioned before, teachers reported improvements in oral communication skills. Generally speaking, the students were positive about the communicative classrooms as well. However, some of the teachers, in the classroom observations, we saw that some of the teachers were not using enough small group activities to give students the chance to communicate more often. And also that they were using L1, which in this case was Spanish. So they were speaking Spanish to give things like instructions or set up group activities, when they would be better off using English, so that students could get more exposure and improve their listening as well. So a few things there to think about. So overall, the conclusions that we came to when we did this research were that the findings into the impact of the flipped classroom approach at UVM were generally positive, so generally positive feedback. The students and the teachers were generally engaging, in most cases, well. That learner independence was improving, as I've already mentioned several times, and that in oral communication skills, particularly speaking, was improving as well. So two really positive things in two areas that I think UVM were really keen to improve as well. So, that's fitted in well with their goals, I think, for introducing the flipped classroom approach. However, there were some things for improvement, as I've mentioned. So just to sum up some ideas for improvement that would, make for better outcomes for students. So we suggested that student induction training would be very useful. So teaching students how to use the platform, teaching them the kind of study skills that they need to work independently, making it clear what the expectations are. So they need to spend at least 2 hours on the platform, they need to become independent learners, they need to be communicative in the classroom, etc., etc. So this kind of thing is kind of important to make sure students know what they're doing. Secondly, an initial slower speed of teaching and learning. So at the beginning, slow the classes down a little bit. So there's not so many learning objectives, not so much to cover, to allow students to adapt to this new approach and to stop them falling behind early on, which, as we discovered, was happening, and students were becoming demotivated. So if we could slow it down for the first month, say, then students can all get on board, all understand what they need to do, and hopefully fewer students will fall behind. And I think probably the most important one is the last one, is investing in teacher development. So as I'm sure most of you know, an education system, in this case, the teaching at the university, is only as good as its teachers. So, investment in professional development, I think, is key. It could be formal professional development to address some of the areas, the skill gaps that we found. So, for example, techniques in communicative language teaching, setting up and managing pairs or small group work, the importance of how to carry out monitoring and giving feedback. These kind of things really useful and could be in a kind of formal professional development setting. Peer observations as well, we recommended. So teachers watching their colleagues, watching other teachers to learn from each other. This has been found to be a very cost-effective way of improving teaching skills, because it's almost free for an institution to implement this. And similarly, mentorship for newer teachers. So teachers who are just beginning, they don't know how to use the flipped classroom approach, they could watch more experienced teachers, and equally, more experienced teachers could watch them and give them some advice and some tips on how to implement the approach better. So yeah, so really key, we think, is investing in some more teacher development to implement the flipped classroom approach. So overall then, as I say, positive findings from the flipped classroom approach, but some areas to work on. And if anyone else is thinking of implementing it, then I think these areas as well from the beginning would be really useful to consider as well. Okay, so that's my 30 minutes up, more or less. So I just want to introduce you to Wen, our Cambridge English representative in Vietnam. Some of you probably know her already. She works very hard for us out there, and she's an expert on impact. She works on impact studies with us. She's an expert on our teaching materials, teaching and learning materials. She's an expert on our assessment. If you're interested in talking to her about anything that I've talked about today, or you're interested in any of our products or services, then give Wen a call or send her an email. You can see her email address and her phone number at the bottom of the page. So if you would like to take a photo of that, then I will pause for just a second or two, or if anyone wants to get in contact with me, then I'm sure they can through the organisers of the convention, and that would be fine as well. Okay, thank you very much for listening, everybody. It's been really great to be here, and now I'd like to, I think we've probably got about 10 minutes, so I'll be happy to try and answer any questions that you might have about what I've talked about, or I suppose more generally about Cambridge English, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Thank you very much.
Fabulous presentation, and I myself found the presentation really interesting. He gave us an overall pictures of flipped classroom approach in general, and it's really interesting to see that there's a mixed findings about this approach, but we are very happy to see that the findings that we saw is very positive. We still see that flipped classroom approach help to improve the student and learner engagement as well as their learning and independent study. So thank you so much, Graeme. And we have 10 minutes for question and answers. So please, if any questions you have, please.
Hi, Graeme, and thank you for your presentation. I have a few questions. I'll pick one so other people can ask as well. I'm curious if there was any assessment data to measure the students' attainment or compare it to other cohorts of students who have done fully classroom-based physical classroom instruction. I don't know if the university had its own exams or if you were using any Cambridge English exams or anything like that.
No, there wasn't, unfortunately. That's something that we really would have liked to have had. But it was partly because of the pandemic, I think, because we couldn't really get in there at the beginning and do baseline assessments. So that's something that I think, were we to revisit this kind of study with UVM, that we would really like to be able to do that, is to kind of measure a baseline, certainly, and see how they'd improved it, and if possible, have a control group. It's very, with impact assessment, it's very difficult often to have a control group because these things are implemented, across the piece. So, you get the whole university does the same thing. So there's not other students doing something different that we can compare them with. So yeah, unfortunately, it's this study was based entirely really on perceptions. So it was based mainly on qualitative data of what the teachers felt was happening in the classroom and how they felt students were responding to it.
Thank you. I do, but does anyone else have a question first? And then I guess my other question is, what's happened since this program? Has the university, was this a temporary pandemic measure, or has the university decided to carry on with this kind of flipped classroom approach, or something different?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason for them carrying out this research was to find out whether they would like to continue. Because they've invested some money in it, and they wanted to find out how it was going. It kind of coincided with the pandemic. So some of the teaching that I was referring to was actually done online. It would be interesting to do another study to find out, what was happening, what the comparisons were between the online teaching and the face-to-face stuff. But yeah, I mean, the study is, literally in the final stages of being written up. We've kind of presented a draft version to the university, and they've kind of gone away to have a look at it. And the idea, I think, is that, if they feel, I mean, using our study as part of their general evaluation overall of how it's gone, and I guess the cost-benefit analysis as well, then they will, make a decision on whether to continue or not. But what I understand is that the noises are pretty positive, and they would like to transition onto the newer platform that we're using, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's I think the university are quite happy with how it's gone, and their findings, kind of anecdotally, are quite similar to what we found as well. So, there's a positive, that the teachers are positive about it, that the students, generally speaking, are learning communicative skills. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment with it.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you for your questions.
Is there anyone else have questions for Graeme? Why people are thinking of the question, could I ask you a question? So I saw
Of course.
I saw the findings, really interesting, and I'm wondering about the other context. So have you compared to the findings with the findings conducted in other contexts? Because um, I feel quite curious to know whether the finding in your study contradict or it's similar to other contexts, please.
We haven't done a study into the flipped classroom approach in other contexts, actually. So this is the first one that we've done. So for us, it was really quite interesting to find out what was happening. The online learning material that we've done, that we provide, really up until now, it's kind of been, it was designed as a standalone learning platform, so students could do self-study with it. And I think as time's progressed, it's been kind of incorporated into education systems or university teaching like this. And people started to do more of a hybrid learning model with it. I certainly know that for UVM, the office, because we have quite a big office in Mexico, they supported UVM a lot with this, and they actually produced classroom material, so teaching material, lesson plans for the teachers, which corresponded to the modules. So they basically produced a flipped classroom learning syllabus for them, pretty much, where they would do certain modules from online, and then they would go into the class, students would go into the classroom, the teachers would have a lesson plan which was linked to the online learning. But that was produced specially by the Mexico office for UVM. So originally, I suppose what I'm getting at, originally the platform wasn't really designed for the flipped classroom approach. It's something that has kind of evolved. And there may be other people, other institutions that are using it in a similar way that I don't know of. But yeah, in terms of context, this is the only context that I know of where one of our products, I mean, I'm sure there are loads of people using flipped classroom approaches with other providers, but in terms of Cambridge, this is the only one that I know of. So it's the only place that we've done a study. But certainly it would be very interesting to look at other studies as well. And actually, we're beginning to look at one with the new Evolve Digital. Now I remember we've begun a study in Japan, actually, which has a kind of hybrid element. I wouldn't say it's a flipped classroom approach exactly, but it's got a hybrid element. So there's an element of teaching and an element of online learning. yeah, so it'll be interesting to find out what happens there. And we've got, I think, going back to the previous gentleman's questions, we should be able to have a baseline. So we've got in early, we should be able to measure their English at the beginning and see how they've done by the end of the course. So that will be quite interesting, I think. But yeah, as I say, flipped classroom, I think really this is the only study that we've done of this kind.
I think the audience will have a lot of questions. But if you don't have for the audience, then
I'm struggling to hear you. You're breaking up. I don't know if it's the internet connection here or there, but
yeah, I'm sorry. I just said that many audience will have question and they can send email to you if they have more concern. And please share your PowerPoint slide if possible with us. That's much.
Of course, I will.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.